Welcome to the Houndsman XP Podcast, everybody. We've got a great treat for you this week. On this episode, we're going to be talking to Brian Lynn. He's a vice president, one of the vice presidents of at the Sportsmen's Alliance. And I can tell you that over the years, the Sportsmen's Alliance has been out there and been keeping America's sportsmen aware of different rules, laws, things that are coming down the pipe that affect hunting and our adventures outdoors and the lifestyle we choose to lead. And the hound community is no different. And we're going to talk about that and the role that the Sportsmen's Alliance has played in that. But before we get there, how are you today, Brian?
Doing great out here, and spring's starting to finally pop around here, so that's nice. I just wish I could go out turkey and bear hunting, but that's all getting suspended right now, so we'll see what happens here pretty soon. No, our turkey seasons, bear seasons, and even fishing have all been banned due to the COVID-19 right now.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. They started it with youth season and permit bear and fishing, and then they just suspended everything until May 4th right now, and I'm guessing it'll probably get suspended again till the rest of the season.
So it's okay.
Fishing I can almost understand at times because there's places that get stacked up on the shoreline or the boat launches and you're touching the same surfaces and all that kind of thing. Almost, kinda. The hunting I do not understand. It's, maybe you stop at a gas station, which people are already doing, and you don't want to be around anybody. You go out in the woods. So It's a little frustrating.
That is very frustrating. It's really kind of a shocker to me that's even been an option. I have not heard anything like that happening here in Indiana. I haven't even heard a discussion of it or rumors of it happening.
Yeah, let's see. Alaska shut down their resident and non-resident bear season, and then everybody just blew up there. And so they just stopped bear season for non-residents. Washington has shut everything down. Idaho suspended the selling of non-res tags. Nebraska did the same thing. Montana did the same thing, I believe. So yeah, they're doing all sorts of stuff out here.
And that's why we're talking to you, because you know all this stuff, and I don't.
Well, it's a lot of stuff going on always. It's hard to keep up with it sometimes, but our government affairs guys do a great job with it.
Yeah. And I've always been a big fan of the Sportsmen's Alliance. And when I was involved with the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance here, we actually paid an associate membership to the Sportsmen's Alliance and tried to align ourselves with that. And we want to talk about all that stuff, but you've got a pretty good background there, Brian. I want to talk about that a little bit. And you're not a houndsman, but
no,
you've got a little bit of experience with sporting dogs, and that's why it's such a great guy to talk to on this.
Yeah, no, I love the dogs, and that's always kind of been, a passion of mine. And I mean, even I was grade school, middle school, and got my first dog and a Springer Spaniel, and I was reading all the books, training and feeding and, old time books that I found at my granddad's or at the library or whatever. Wasn't always the best information, but, that kind of piqued my interest, and then, it just kind of grew from there. And so, yeah, I'm into the retriever stuff is where I've gotten into, but, I started out at a magazine called Fishing and Hunting News 20 years ago, I guess it's been just this last month, and did that for about a year or so. And then ESPN Outdoors was launching their .com side of things. And so I jumped over to ESPN Outdoors, and I ran the conservation section there in the headline news, and then launched a sporting dog section. And so then I, was working with different writers and trainers and everything. And so it was great. I got to, pick the brains of people and edit all their writings and stuff like that. And then, I'd be asking follow-up questions and sort of, okay, I'm seeing where this training is going. And this guy has one style and this guy has a different style. And they have, everybody thinks they're opposites. But if you look at it, here's where they have a lot of commonality. It's just right here and here where it branches. And at the end result's the same. They're just taking different paths to get there,
Exactly.
or they stress different things. They find one thing more important than another, depending on what they hunt or where they hunt or whatever. And that's kind of the great thing I love about dogs. I love about hunting is, in this country, it's so varied. We're so large, and there's so many different heritages and cultures and ways of, going duck hunting or rabbit hunting or whatever, and the different dogs that have evolved and training methodologies and everything. It's fascinating. It's cool. It's what makes America, America. And so, I love doing it, and I got to do it at ESPN, and then I went over to Outdoor Life magazine, and I was there for a few years, and then I was their sporting dogs editor for about 6 years. So, I've got to pick the brains of some of the top pros around the country and watch them work and hang out and have a beer after training and, so get into a little more stuff and those deep discussions that, dog guys tend to get into when they're having beers. So, It's been great. Love it.
Yep. And the hound community is no different, Brian. I mean, we interview people from – I've interviewed people from Norway for this show. We've got some other international guests that we're trying to line up right now. But you just look inside North America here, the way our houndsmen from Idaho or the West Coast or the Western states, the demands they put on their dogs are different than what the Eastern United States does. And you even get to the Southeast versus the Upper Midwest. And it's just a different thing. So people train different ways. They look for different traits in dogs. They, their needs for being successful are different from the regions that they're hunting. So yeah, we can certainly relate to that, and that's relatable. So. Good stuff.
Yeah, most definitely. That's always the thing you see on the internet forums and stuff. People going off about, a dog only does this, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. And it's like, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and even more to train a dog. And do what works for you. And if you're happy with it, then that's the standard. A pro is going to have a different standard than the amateur, who's going to have a different standard than, the meat hunter, as you're called, or whatever. It's just, dogs are here. And if we lived more like dogs, we'd all be happier. They just enjoy every day, every moment. And, if we quit worrying about the little crap like they do, then we'd all be better off.
It seems like this conversation, due to the time frame we're in here, and I don't know when exactly this episode will air, but it'll definitely be relatable when it does. I look at my dogs, and they don't care about COVID-19. They don't care. They are perfectly happy that I am, in social isolation right now because I'm with them, and getting to spend time with them. So
yeah, exactly. They don't care about anything. I mean, It's like my old dog when he was, before I had to put him down a couple of years ago. He got up and he was in bad shape and tough to eat and stuff, but he was still content and happy. And he'd come over, put his head on my lap, and they don't worry about what's coming. And then if we could be a little more like that, the world would be a lot better place.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that I think you just hit a very good talking point right there. A dog trainer, a houndsman, it doesn't matter whether it's a Labrador or a blue tick hound, that connection that you have with that dog is no different. And that's the common thread that draws all of us hunters together, especially within the dog hunting community. I'm not expecting my blue tick hound to retrieve a duck, and you're not expecting your Labrador pup there to track down a lion. So, but we have that common thread, and that's working dogs and that enjoyment of watching and training and being involved in that process. So how long you been at Sportsmen's Alliance now?
Been at Sportsmen's Alliance, I guess it's been 5-6 years now. But I've been involved with them since I was at ESPN. So I was running the sporting dog section and conservation section and running the headline news and stuff. And I also was writing a little bit, and I'd go off on tangents, as I was watching things. And the Sportsmen's Alliance is always up. Always used them as a resource like, hey, what's going on here? Or they would flag something and say, hey, watch out for this. And I'd use that as a jumping off point to talk about things. And so I was always working with them, looking for information, fact checking things. I've done a lot in the industry, television and different things like that. I'm like, hey, do you see any problems with this? And, just that kind of relationship of checking in and using them as resources. And basically that's what we hope we are for, the hunter, the pros out there, for, anybody is, the writers that I work with, being, I do the marketing and communication side of things. So I work with a lot of media, and it's like, hey, we're here as a resource. Here's what's going on in this state, and this state, and this state. It's for hunters especially, we are very focused on our state or our region where we hunt. And we can complain about the ducks aren't there, or this lawmaker's doing that, or whatever. But if you step back and look at it from a 30,000 foot national view, you get a different thing. Like if there's regulations in, New Hampshire for banning outdoor dogs, and somebody's in New Hampshire is going, well, this is just ridiculous. Our guys are lost their damn mind.
Right.
They're trying to stop us from having an outdoor dog. That's one thing. But then if you step back from that 30,000 foot look and go, oh, this is happening in New Hampshire, it's happening in Vermont, it's happening in Pennsylvania, it's happening in Montana, it's happening in Wisconsin, it's happening in 8 other states at the exact same time using almost the exact same language.
Isn't that a coincidence?
This isn't, yeah, there ain't no coincidences. Yeah, you see it from that vantage point, you go bing, 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 and you go, oh, this is a coordinated attack.
Exactly.
And what's the common thread running between almost all of it? The Humane Society of the United States. So it's like, oh, this is what they're pushing for this session and maybe the next session, and then that's a real thing that's going on. They set arbitrary temperatures and say that you can't have a dog outside for a certain amount of time at a certain temperature. If you're home, you're not home. If you're on a tether, not on a tether. It's usually what a human can relate to. They anthropomorphize everything. So, well, would you like to be outside if it's 32 degrees outside? No, you shouldn't be outside. A human can't do that for more than 15 minutes. So your dog shouldn't be out there if it's below 32 degrees for more than 15 minutes. And you have to be home in case, the dog wants back in. And it's like, wait a minute, time out. Dogs are physiologically different than us.
Right.
They conserve heat. They have double coats. They have, all sorts of stuff. At 32 degrees, my lab's loving it. If we all go jump in the river at 40 degrees, the humans aren't going to be feeling too good, and the labs are going to be having a great time.
Sure.
So it's not the same. But politicians, the non-hunting public, the little fur baby folks in town are going, yeah, that seems reasonable. And then this stuff gets passed.
Right.
And this stuff gets passed. What's that do to your breeders, your trainers, your kennels, and that stuff? It adds overhead. It adds extra bodies to maintain the kennels. It adds, in Pennsylvania, I believe it was, you had to have a doghouse built to exacting code standards, 4 inches of overhang, this type of insulation inside, no type of insulation that can get wet or retain any moisture or anything like that. So that starts adding costs. So it's a back end. Not only does it stop it directly by not having an outdoor dog, my dog needs to acclimate. He's a lab. He needs to acclimate to the cold as it gets colder and develop that coat. It adds to the economic side. If you're a breeder or a kennel or whatever, you got to have all these extra bodies or extra equipment or specifically built shelters. So then you have to raise your costs of training or kenneling or the cost of the pups and all that. And as you increase costs, the business model goes down.
Right.
So they hit you on two sides there.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I'll just break it down so that, I'll make sure I'm not misunderstanding, the outright attack, just coming out and saying, no more duck hunting, because what they want to try to do is say, we're going to take away the different parts of duck hunting and make it more difficult for you to own a Labrador Retriever through some of this anti-dog legislation.
Yeah. The dog stuff is it's a low hanging fruit, and the hounds guys are on the front line. I mean, trapping and the houndsmen are the ones who are getting hammered because it's easy to paint it as being unethical.
Mm-hmm.
It's not fair. Well, these guys just turn these dogs loose and chase the cat up the tree or chase the bear up the tree, and the poor bear or cat's up there and they're stressed, and the dogs are barking, and these guys are drinking beer at the pickup, and then they just walk out and they shoot it at point blank, and it falls out, and the dogs all rip it up. And
we try to just drive. We try to drive right up under the tree so we don't even have to walk.
Yeah. Yeah. No joke. Gosh, I've been on some cat chases with my buddy here who's a biologist and houndsman, and he's like, God, it's only 400 yards. I was like, sweet. And it was like 400 yards straight uphill in the snow. He scooted right up that thing. I got up there, my lungs were exploding. I was like, it took me like half hour just to recover, just sit under the tree.
Right.
So, yeah. But
that's the thing that a lot of these
to vilify for them.
Yeah. And it's easy for people to believe it because things that they aren't exposed to, things that they aren't familiar with, then when we allow the anti-hunting public to control the narrative on that, then people are easily swayed because they have nothing to base their experience off of.
Exactly.
There's nothing there. So, all they think about is, why is this dog wearing a GPS collar? They're tracking this dog all the way to letting him do all the work, and then the easy part is just getting in there. That there's no basis for them to compare to, or no base knowledge for them to make a decision.
Yeah, they are only getting half the story, and that story is tainted, you know, and it's and a lot of it seems reasonable to them. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want my dog out there freezing. That's so mean. Like, why would you put an e-collar on a dog? That's horrible. It's like, no, they have no way of doing it. And sometimes trying to explain it makes it worse. So, it's the devil if you do, devil if you don't. So you have to take different approaches depending on the topic, depending on, who it is, and if it's a politician or if it's media or what is it, so it's different messaging there, but there's a lot of stuff, and dogs are on the front lines. We've been seeing that a lot this last session or two. Outdoor dogs are big. Tethering is big. Let's see. Yeah, things like that are huge. Number of pups you can have before you're labeled as like a pet vendor or a professional breeder, which then opens you up to permitting processes, additional taxes, inspections of your home, different things like that. They keep trying to lower that threshold. I think in Florida this last session there was a bill that said if you have more than 4 puppies, you are now a professional breeder. And it opened up all those doors. So those are things we look at. The tethering things sometimes is meant for the politician believes they're doing something good, stopping that dog from being chained up in the yard for its whole life, But if taken to the letter of the law, anybody that tethers for, bird dog trials or, you have your dog staked out or whatever,
right.
It affects them. And then they would all be acting illegally. So we either try to go in and stop it, or we try to get exemptions written in for field trials, for hunting endeavors, or by breed, saying, okay, these dogs that are commonly tethered either as training or, kenneling practices or whatever, or health and safety. If you have a climber that likes to climb out of kennels, has the potential of either getting away or hanging itself if it gets caught, tethering it out's better. So,
well, and one of the things, to touch on tethering, one of the reasons why I tether, especially pups, younger dogs, is it teaches them to not fight that. So if I'm out hunting and I happen to be hunting in a place where a dog can become entangled in a legal snare or an illegal snare or a fence or anything like that, he's going to not injure himself by fighting that situation. That's why, and that's the story that never gets told. Your non-hunting, anti-hunting public will never understand why the dog is tethered. And when I explain it to them, I have people come to my house, why is that dog tied up like that? Well, this is why. And then they're like, oh, okay, I never thought about that. But we don't do a good job of getting that message out there, but we can't cover every base anyway.
Yeah. No, that's true. Bird dogs are the same way, give to the neck type stuff. And then that's where the stimulation comes from to trigger that point and the woe post and all that. So, it's exactly the same.
Yeah. One of the things I'd like to talk about, and we'll get down in the weeds kind of on some of the legislative stuff here in a few minutes, but maybe for some of our listeners who haven't researched Sportsmen's Alliance, they haven't really gone there and looked to see what kind of resources are there. I know that we've even generated topics of discussion on this podcast based on Sportsmen's Alliance news releases, things that come up on your social media platforms, and then we've launched, like you said before, jumping off points for topics of discussion. But can you give us an overview of the Sportsmen's Alliance for our listeners? What do you guys do?
Yeah.
Why do you exist?
Yeah, so we've been around for a little over 40 years now. 1977, I believe, we were incorporated, and back then we were called the Wildlife Legislative Fund of America. And we started in Ohio, and we're still headquartered in Columbus, Ohio. And so in the 70s is when that animal rights movement kind of came over from Europe and started hitting North America. And, you know, this idea started growing and taking hold. And they discovered that, hey, you know, if we can't get bills passed, we'll just use the ballot initiative process. You collect enough signatures, you get to put on the ballot, and then it's just a PR move from there.
Exactly.
And you let the direct public do it. And the direct public, all you need to capture are those big voting blocks, those big urban voting blocks, the city people who don't understand any of this. So it's real emotional messaging. So they came into Ohio, kind of one of those swing states at the time. And, you know, if you can pass a law in Ohio, you can take it to other places.
Sure.
And so they wanted to ban trapping then, you know, and so they got it qualified for the ballot initiative. And, you know, there was a bunch of guys, sportsmen, biologists, businessmen in the community, everybody that was interested in this and was like, wait a minute, we gotta do something to stop this. So they ran the counter campaign, ended up defeating it. Mm-hmm. Then they all went back to their day jobs, you know, but then they just moved to other states. The animal rights movement just moved to other states in the next couple of years and started doing it there. And the states were calling these guys saying, hey, how do you beat these guys? You know, and they said, oh, there's a need here. And so they created the Wildlife Legislative Fund of America, which is now Sportsmen's Alliance. But that's how we were set up, was like just kind of happenstance. Some guys that loved hunting and wanted to protect it, had legal backgrounds and business backgrounds and biological backgrounds. And we basically became like a PR firm. Mm-hmm. You know, whenever there's a ballot initiative, we'd go in and say, look, here's what we can do. We can do this, this, and this. Here's what we found to be successful. And we'll run the campaigns, and then we go back home and whatever. And then it's moved into lobbying and working in all 50 state legislatures across the nation. You know, I think right now we are working on about 285 bills nationwide. And there's another probably 200 or 300 that they've flagged, and they're just kind of watching, not thinking they're going to go anywhere. Mm-hmm. So we work in all 50 state legislatures. We work at the ballot box, which is where we originated. And then we also work in state and federal courts. And currently we have 3 federal lawsuits with the federal government and 1 state-based lawsuit against New Jersey for their move. Phil Murphy out in Jersey there just pandered. I mean, and this is just point blank. Mm-hmm. He pandered to the animal rights movement out there, which is very strong. It's very contentious, very urban area, most densely populated state in the nation. Right. Said, if I get elected, I will end the bear hunt. I will end bear hunting in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. He got elected. He tried to end it, but legally he could not end bear hunting outright because of a case we won there in 2005. He couldn't end it, but what he did do is he acted as a land manager, is their argument, acted as a land manager and closed all state-owned public lands to bear hunting. Mm-hmm. And so ourselves with SCI and New Jersey Outdoor Alliance, we all jumped on a lawsuit together and sued, and so that's going through the process right now. So all 50 state legislatures, the court, state and federal court, and at the ballot box. And we've been doing that for about 40 years now. And we're a small group. I mean, we're not huge. We don't have a ton of money. We don't have a ton of people. I think the office, you know, I think we have fewer than 20 employed total,
Okay.
That's the bean counter, the girl up front, the education, the youth guys, that kind of stuff. So we're a small, quick to respond, group, but the guys we have on our legal team and our government affairs are top notch. I mean, they're leading the industry, and, they know how to get it done. The legal team in these lawsuits for wolves in the Great Lakes, grizzly bears out in Yellowstone, and predator management up in Alaska. Those are the big federal lawsuits we're working on, and they're just great legal minds. I mean, they've been victory after victory, lawsuits and fighting the animal rights movement just head on. I mean, we're a small organization, and we're taking on Humane Society of the United States, which raises $200 million a year, and they've got friends in the media and a friendly message and everything else. And we win something more than like 90% of the stuff we engage in.
Not only in like the news media, but even media things coming out of Hollywood. I was flipping the channels last night and saw a program that was about Alaska, and it was on a well-known channel. And as I sat there and I watched it, there were a couple interesting things, but then they were showing this. This is the animal rights part and how they indoctrinate people. But I saw a short section in that, and I couldn't watch the whole thing, where a moose was birthing a baby moose, calf moose. And the whole time they're putting in all these noises to show the struggle of the mother. And then once the calf is born, these little cute noises that make you feel like, and I looked at my wife and I said, birthing in the wild is largely silent because they don't want to draw predators. They just suffer through it. And this is all Hollywood drama to put a human characteristic on this animal to sway the opinion. So it's media at every level. It's not just the news.
Oh. Yeah, I was trying to watch Call of the Wild with my son the other day, and the new movie that came out. And I read the book as a kid. I mean, Jack London, it's, naturalism. It's real. It's raw.
Yeah.
Holy crap, I'm watching that. I couldn't even watch it. I was like, I'm done. It was so bad. It's just like, geez Louise. So, it's in that, and all of that is just, subconscious stuff that sinks in. They see the dog out freezing in the snow, and they think, oh, and then they get done, and the news comes out and says, hey, there's an outdoor dog ban. They want to stop having dogs outdoors. They're like, yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I watched this movie.
And then they'll go vote off the emotions.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They vote off emotions, and it's a tough sell a lot of times. I mean, here in Washington State, they were trying to redefine animal cruelty and put in a definition of pain and suffering. Mm-hmm. And it was basically anything from extreme physical abuse to mild mental discomfort would qualify as animal cruelty.
We tracked that a little bit.
And if a human would experience it, it can be generally assumed that an animal would experience it the same way. And the government affairs guys actually let me sit in on this because I live here in Washington, and I don't know how those guys do it and maintain their composure, because I was losing my shit. I was just like, what the heck? I was just trying not to go crazy here, and I was like, wait a minute. I used the example of my lab jumping in the rivers, and, if any human did it, they would be freezing and cold and hurting in the lab. I got to train them to come out of the river. And, but that would have been abuse, because I forced the dog. I told him, I sent him into the river, or used an e-collar on him for training, And so we worked at it. I mean, it was 5-6 hours of meetings over about a month. And finally, like, the legislator were like, look, if the animal cruelty is here and there's so much, evidence, you don't need this definition. It's obvious. The evidence supports it. So what do you need this for? And the legislators, thank goodness, were finally like, to the lobbyist, was like, look, do you want to pass the meat here, or are you trying to do something here? Because we like the dairy guys, we like the cattlemen, we like these guys. And that's what we do. We go into a state and we form an alliance. So we call ourselves the Alliance. we were working with the cattle guys. We got AKC on board. We got UKC on board. We got, the horse guys, the backcountry horse guys on board. Mm-hmm. We were all on the same side and sending the same message and opposing it and pointing out the reasons why. And the legislators were finally like, all right, we're just killing this part. And they struck the language out, and they went with, the higher end stuff that is actual animal cruelty that none of us actually want to see. We all love our dogs.
There you go.
And our horses and whatever. We don't want to see abuse, but we don't want to get caught up in very broad language that makes what we do our common everyday practices and proven practices of training and hunting. We don't want to see those get caught. And that's where so much of our work comes in, is these bills are either unintentionally written by politicians that are very broad and catch you, or they're intentionally written by the Humane Society of the United States to be misapplied in other areas. And so we go in there and make sure that language, it's all about words, and make sure that language isn't going to catch us by surprise down the road, or can't be used later to vault into something else.
Well, you even look at the way some of these bills are written. It's written in a way that it is a catch-22 for the hunting public. Because if you come out and you say, I oppose this legislation, then the Humane Society can spin off of that and say, see, they're a bunch of barbarians. So you have to be diligent to look at that, and like the Sportsmen's Alliance is doing, making sure that the proper language is put in there and the message is sent to the legislators that, hey, we're just as much. I don't want to, if I pull in my driveway this afternoon and see somebody mistreating my dog, they're going to have a problem, because I care about that dog. And I'm not going to do it, and I don't expect it from anybody else. But this type of language simply can't, exist here, because it is not scientific based. And we had, for instance, we've had Arlie Reynolds, a senior nutritionist from Purina, on the podcast.
Yeah.
And
I've met him before.
He talks about metabolic rates in dogs, and I don't care how you train yourself or how you feed yourself or what mattress you sleep on, you aren't going to be able to do the same things that Arlie Reynolds dogs can do. So that right there tells you that they're not human. They've got different physiological abilities than we do as humans, and we're actually cheating them. We see this all the time in the people at the dog park with their dogs that aren't being fed properly, aren't exercised properly, riding on the laps of people going down the road. It's like, who's really abusing an animal here? Me. So that's one thing. One thing I want to ask you real quick, and maybe it's real easy to understand. Well, maybe it's not as easy as it should be, but it's easier to understand how to combat the states with ballot initiatives, referendum states. Those seem to be easy marks for this anti-hunting, anti-dog legislation. Like you already alluded to, all you got to do is get it on the ballot. You you target these urban environments, get your signatures, it goes on the ballot, and now you can put it out there and you can drive whatever narrative you want with sad-faced puppies and little baby moose making cute noises and push that agenda. So I want to talk about the other states, the ones that are not ballot initiative states. How much of a target-rich environment are they? What are you seeing coming out of those states where it's still in a resources commission set up there where it can't go on a ballot?
It's all basically the same, though, because all you have to do, it's all about the voting blocks. Mm-hmm. So like here in Washington State, it's tough, and it's the same story everywhere. You have your big urban city, and that's where most of the people are. That's where most of the media coverage is. That's where more of your representatives come from. So then you already have a stacked deck against you, right? Mm-hmm. So it comes down to rural versus urban. Our entire heritage comes down to that. The laws come down to that. The media comes down to that. So it's like you're already it's stacked against you. So you go, sub bill moves and it's in the state legislature, and whichever party controls it or whatever, doesn't matter. It's like how many of the party are in are coming from these different voting blocks, because those are the guys who are already going to be stacked up against you. So now you either have to convince them, or you have to have enough guys on the other side from all the rural areas to block it. So it's really coming down to rural versus urban in all of it. But the sooner you can stop legislation, the better. Like once it starts hitting the media, the further it goes in the committee process, the harder it is to stop. So if we can get it as soon as it's introduced, we're on it. Like before it's even, discussed on the floor the first time, or before it even hits the first committee or the newspaper or whatever, we're on it. We're already trying to kill it or amend it or put exemptions in or whatever we can do. We're making noise and we're on the phone. And then, depending how that goes, a lot of times we do this stuff behind the scenes. They'll be like, hey man, they don't want to talk about this, but they told us it's not moving, so we're laying low on it. And they said, the sponsor said he's going to kill it. He's not going to move it. He didn't understand. We talked to him. It's cool. And then we'll watch it and be like, okay, it's up for discussion, make another phone call. Okay, we're still on the same page. Okay, it didn't move. It's dead. Great. Move on to the next thing. Or, hey, it's still being discussed and moved. Now we got to put out the alert, and that's where the public comes in.
Right.
We put out the alert. Please call these guys right here. And go follow our link to our website, put in your address. It'll pull up all your folks, call. Because if 10 or 12 people will take 5 minutes to actually call, especially in this day and age of email and text and all that, if you'll pick up the phone and just call and, voice your displeasure, it makes them go, holy crap, I'm getting a lot of calls here. And not only if I'm getting this many calls in this day and age, there's a whole lot more voters out there that feel the same.
Right.
So then they'll start thinking about it and be like, okay, this isn't a good idea. Or how do I make these people happy? Take out this language, write this exemption, whatever. So then they start listening. They want to play ball with us.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, and sometimes that's all it takes, and we'll be like, okay, we want this done. And they'll be like, great. And then it's done. And we're protected and we're good. Other times we'll be like, look, stop having people call us. And we're like, oh, okay, well, we want this. We'll talk about it. We're like, nope, call again. We'll put out another alert. And that's when you step on the throat and everybody get in there and start calling again. It's this game, a perception of voters and voices. And, are they going to make their constituents mad and lose the next election or get bad PR out of it or what? So they have to understand that there's a consequence for their action, if they don't listen to us. And hunters, by and large, we're disengaged. We just want to hunt. We want to go out and train our dogs. We want to do whatever, and we don't do it. We don't protect ourselves until, not just the wolf's at the door, but he's under the bed and he's coming out to get us. And it's like the last second. So we need to do a better job of getting involved sooner, and we need people involved sooner. Our club systems, like you were saying, the dog systems, the dog clubs, the various dog clubs around the country that are, under whatever umbrella, we need to engage, and, we all need to be engaging sooner. The sooner we can reach them and kill it, the better.
Definitely want to talk about that. One of the things that I want to kind of circle back around to before we get there is ask you this question. And based on your experience, you guys are dealing with this business every single day. So we want to really drill down into the experience and the trends that you were seeing. But how do we get to the point where the people with the least amount invested have such a large say in how our wildlife is managed? And you can look at that from the wolf introduction in Colorado to an anti-hunting bill somewhere that say it's a large predator. But the wolf is such an easy one to talk about when you think about the amount of money that has been spent on damage claims and mitigation and all that sort of stuff for the wolf, but yet the people that are most affected have the least amount of influence in saying how it is managed. How do we get there?
Well, basically it's follow the money, Humane Society of the United States is pushing most of this. And like I said, they have a $200 million a year operating budget. I mean, that's just a year, $200 million, and they have a huge fund beyond that. And so they can self-fund a ballot initiative. They can walk in and gather the signatures, and this is what they do. They have their state rep. They did it in Arizona for the cats a couple of years ago.
I'm glad you brought that one up.
Cats. Yeah, they did. I literally have the woman's application, and she used her Humane Society of the United States email, and she was the head of it, and used that for the application, and then turn in the signature. So they can go into the state. Their state rep there, or whatever, their state head of their state chapter or whatever, goes and files for it, and then they just gather signatures and get it on there, and then they throw money at it. And they in Maine, for black bears up there, and to stop hounding, baiting, and trapping of black bears up there, they tried it twice. They threw $2.7 million, I think it was, 2.7 million at it. And like 95% of it came from Washington, D.C., from the Humane Society of the United States headquarters, And so they can self-fund these ballot initiatives, and Humane Society of the United States can just pick out where they want to go. It's the same thing with lobbyists. Okay, we want to attack here. We got lobbyists we can work with there, pay them. And the sportsmen, all of a sudden, we're already on defense, just the way the mechanism is set up. Things are open. They're trying to close them. So they can pick and choose, and we kind of just got to react. But we're left on a short leash to hurry up and raise funds and try to match these guys. The marketing and airtime is expensive, and Arizona is a perfect example. The market there is just Phoenix. You just win Phoenix and you won the whole thing. And you got early voting there, so you have to back up your messaging. It's all about timing the messaging of your airtime with the voting time. But then you also have the bilingual aspect of Spanish down there that you have to run twice as many ads. So literally, to run a ballot initiative is probably $5 million. Tell me what Sportsman's group has $5 million to protect hound hunting.
Yes.
So we're already under the gun there.
So you brought up two recent issues that directly affected Houndsman. I'm glad you did. Maybe there's somebody out there that doesn't understand what the Sportsmen's Alliance did for just in those two identified cases right there. This is your opportunity. Talk up Sportsmen's Alliance. Tell people why they need to be involved with you and why they should be using your resources and building relationships with you now. What did you do in Arizona?
Arizona, Arizona, the guys there did a great job, and we consulted a little bit and we worked with them somewhat. That was a lot. They did a great job organizing people and attacking and taking defensive measures. There were some changes to the state law there that helped out too, as far as signature gathering and paying signature gatherers and the qualifying stuff that helped the process immensely. But what really helped it also was that's the time of that Me Too movement, and Wayne Pacelli, the head of the CEO of Humane Society at the time, got caught up in the Me Too scandal. And so all of a sudden they had this big fire that was being covered by the New York Times, the Washington Post, and everybody else. And I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on with them, their board of directors, so they had this huge fire going on, PR fire. And it's pretty hard to go into a state from out of state and say, you need to change this. And all we have to say is, yeah, this guy is the guy that, has been telling a woman that if she wants to get ahead, she has to sleep with him, right. And so they suspended the campaign, but the key here is that they suspended the campaign.
Yeah.
The organization that they created, can't remember what it was called, still exists, and it still has a bank account, and it still has $500,000 in that bank account.
In Arizona,
so they can restart this in Arizona right now.
Yep.
So they could restart this tomorrow.
Right.
They'll probably wait till after the election, because what people don't want to do now is give conservative voters a reason to get out and vote. And you might have a bunch of folks who, would oppose it, but they're too lazy to go vote or whatever. But all of a sudden, if you, do this during the election time and the presidential election, if they're going to be voting anyways, they'll vote against it. So a lot of this stuff is laying low probably until after the election. into next year. And then you'll probably see a lot of ballot initiatives starting up again. So that's, what we do is we look at the political landscape, we look at the airtime, we look at the messaging. And that's what we did in Maine is both times, 2004 and 2014.
Yeah.
We walk in and we're like, hey, here's where we've done this. Here's how we do it. If you want us to do this, we can help set this up, help run it, do the messaging. We work with the people on the ground. Like, we can put some money in, but we're not a huge group. So it's going to take on the ground fundraising and work on the messaging. And I mean, our government affairs guys do a great job. They go out, they do the polling, and we, in Montana, everybody thought it was, if you removed, all you have to do, it's Montana to protect trapping. All you have to do is talk about wolves or elk and deer and cows, and you're done. Well, that worked, but it didn't work for women with children. They didn't care. None of the messaging worked. The only thing that they cared about is if you remove trapping, poison would have to be used. So that was messaging that we incorporated. Hey, if we got to lose trapping, then we're going to have to poison these things, and that's going to be out around parks and whatever else. They didn't like that, so they voted with us. So it's finding those messages and nuances, and it changes. It's different depending on the topic, the households, what the actual vote is, and the demographics of the area. Then you have to time it with back it up and time it with your voting time and, your different things like that, and come out with these messages and airtime. And so that's what we do. We walk in, we basically run the PR campaign and work with all the different pieces and organize it and come out with hard-hitting messages that resound with the non-hunting public. Give them a reason to care. We don't care if they hound, if they like hounding, if they like hunting. Like, they can be anti-hunting, but people are very selfish when they vote. How is this going to impact me? So we have to make them care about it. While they're in there for that 10 minutes or whatever that they're voting, they have to think about that message. And so that's what we aim to do. It's like, here's what's going to happen if you take this away. And a lot of it's using emotion like the other side does. We have all the facts. We have all the science. Right. But we're in a day and age that those don't matter anymore. Social outrage, emotion, that stuff drives PR campaigns. And when you come into a ballot initiative, that's a PR campaign. And so you have to kind of play at the same level that they do.
Yep, absolutely. We see that all the time. All you got to do, don't confuse me with facts. Just tell me how you feel.
Yeah.
So we'll. I kind of want to build a conversation here, or have a conversation here on how, obviously, we can't make our lifestyle bulletproof. I don't care what you do. There's going to be some injuries along the way, but tell us how state organizations, specifically hound organizations, can start today to start building a war chest or a plan for defense, or how can they be proactive on this thing? What have you seen in other states that have been good?
Yeah, see, and that's something we've been preaching for a long time. And it's very hard to do. But building that war chest, that's the exact term we've used in discussions, is we need a war chest. And if we can get sportsmen organized enough and create a war chest and just keep it there, because the attack's going to come. It's just a matter of time. Right. And that's usually the biggest problem, is we're already behind the gun when it comes to money. We have to spend 6 months raising money, and then use it all at the end. If we had, $250,000 or, $100,000, whatever, sitting in an account, even if it was for a couple of years, and then something comes in, a ballot initiative or, a huge lobbying effort, whatever it is, if we had that money there, you could move right away. You can get a jump start on your messaging. You can get a jump start on everything else. You can beat them to the punch. We're the boxer in the corner getting wailed on until the last second, and Rocky comes swinging out, looking for that knockout punch.
Right.
If we had a little more room, we'd be in a lot better position to fight. So state organizations, if you guys, I remember paying dues, for the retriever stuff, and that goes to club days, and that goes for equipment buys, and that goes for whatever for your banquets and different things like that, and that's all great, and you need that. But if you can put some in reserve, or start another account, or do a fundraiser every year or something, that you can start building an account, a legal account, that you just keep. And this is the tough part, is people see the money there and then they don't see the threat coming. And it might be, and that's, we haven't got into chapters yet for Sportsmen's Alliance. It's something we're looking at. Like I said, we were set up as this PR machine that came into a state, and then we left, and we went back home and went to put out the next fire. But we're looking at trying to build a chapter system like everybody else has, but we don't want to have all the same pitfalls, do it the exact same. It's like there's a fine balance of recreating the wheel, but not, we want to do a better job. So we're trying to figure out that balance. And part of the thing is like, well, it's important that the local chapter gets to keep some money, but we need money at headquarters to do a better job fighting nationally. And how do you tell a guy in, Indiana that, yes, send us money, we've got this fight over here in Maine to worry about? Well, and that's a hard sell, but if you're smart, you're looking at it going, if it's happening in Maine, if it's happening in Arizona, it's already happened here in Washington State and Oregon.
Right.
You damn well know that sooner or later it's going to be happening in Indiana.
Yes.
It's just a matter of time,
We've been very fortunate here. But
yeah.
You're right.
And there's certain pockets and states that have been, the South and Southeast are pretty strong, but everybody else is pretty much, on the map and the target. But it can be a couple of years. It can be 5 years, or 10 years, so people start seeing this and, the threat's not there. We don't have to worry about it. And everybody gets complacent again, and it's like, no, that's the hard part. So if you can put aside some money for legal issues, and because the attack's going to come, or, whatever. The other thing is we have memberships for ourselves, for the Sportsmen's Alliance. It's an individual membership. You can become a member starting at $35, and it goes up from there, and you get different perks. We also have business partner memberships. So, a lot of the big guys, Browning, Winchester, different groups like that belong to this at higher levels. But, if you have a sporting goods store or whatever, buddy at DU Hunting Supply, he's a member of ours, and it starts at $2,500, and that helps us. That helps us fight legally. It helps us lobby. It helps us get the messaging out, all that. There's also club memberships. So if you're local dog club, your Indiana chapter, you belong to UKC or whatever, if you want to also, you can be a club member of the Sportsmen's Alliance. And I think that starts at $100 or $200 or something like that, which is nothing. Yeah, $250 is what it starts at, which is nothing across a club of any size, really. $10 a member or something. But that also gives us not just capital, but it gives us a voice. And it gives us a voice on the ground. Like, hey guys, in Indiana, we got this bill coming through and about tethering dogs. Go make some noise.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's one thing we've talked about in the past. Sometimes there are times when you need mass numbers. Indiana Sportsmen's Roundtable needs to be able to walk into a Fish and Wildlife meeting and say, we represent this many sportsmen across the state of Indiana. That's why individual memberships to the organizations like this are important. But, right now there are hound hunting breed organizations. You've got the Trim Walker Fancier and Breeders Association, and you got the United English Breeders, and you've got Black and Tans, and all of them that could be assisting by becoming associate members of the Sportsmen's Alliance, and state organizations could as well. I agree with you 100%. who's your
we pretty much have a membership for anybody who wants one.
Yeah.
Whatever level or demographic or whatever you're in, we've got something that's in there, and hats and shirts and buck knives and
Right.
our monthly magazine that we send out, and there's different perks for clubs, signs and different things like that saying you're protecting your passion and things. So yeah, there's check it out. It's on the website there, and so yeah.
So okay, the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance becomes a member of the Sportsmen's Alliance. Now, there's a reason why we named our organization Alliance, and it, just so you know, because it matched what you guys were doing. It was actually taken from the way,
cool.
Yeah, Sportsmen's Alliance, Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance. So it seemed like a good fit. And like I said, I've been involved in a couple years. I don't know where we're at on that, keeping that membership up now, but I can check easy enough. But so we've paid that, and yeah, we got T-shirt and a knife and a banner, and stuff that we threw in on the raffle at the banquets and different things like that. But now there's an issue. What can the leadership of the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance expect from Sportsmen's Alliance when a ballot? We don't have ballots, so it would be controversial legislation.
Yeah. Yeah, so that gives us somebody to go to immediately, right? Like the Washington thing here, working with Buddy at DU. It's like, okay, I gave him a call and we talked about it. We talked about the good, the bad, and how we get through this, the political landscape. And he went in as a representative of dog groups in that area, and then we came in from the national perspective where we're talking behind the scenes. So it gives us a contact point. It gives us boots on the ground. And it gives us political buy-in right away. It's one thing if the Sportsmen's Alliance walks in as this national group,
Yep.
They're like, okay, that carries some weight. But then all of a sudden now we have boots on the ground that are echoing what we're saying. And you're coming in also representing those people and making noise. You're their constituents.
Yes.
They really have a vested interest in listening to what you folks have to say. And if we're saying the same thing and we got lawyers on our side too, then all of a sudden they're going, oh, this is a little different, and I'm getting a lot of pushback, and then we can reach media, and I can find somebody, if I have a media person, and then I can call you and be like, hey, who's a good person who's articulate, that can talk about this and put it in the right light. Here's the messaging we need to talk about. Let's focus on this. Let's not focus here because that's just going to lead us down a rabbit hole that there's no good outcome. So here's some good messaging. Let's work on this. Let's get them to talk to this media person. Let's get, you need to call the senator at this time. I'll call him afterwards and you talk to him, and that type of stuff. So it gives us the national influence, but it gives us that boots on the ground piece. The other side is that we catch we catch a lot. We catch probably 95% or more of the legislation going through. Every now and then, though, there's things that we don't catch that slip through or that is airdropped into an unrelated bill, so it doesn't catch on our software the first time.
It's attached at second reading.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's like, whoa, we didn't catch that. And we've gotten, people call in or send emails or messages on Facebook like, hey, here's this, and this. I'm like, oh, thanks. I'll send it over to them, and they're like, oh, yeah, or yep, we're on it. We already know about it. And I'm like, okay, so I tell somebody. But it also gives us that extra set of eyes. And, or if it's a fish and game regulation meeting, that isn't going to be flagged by our stuff, that local influence and the local set of eyes is huge. It keeps us aware and already gives us that in to start talking to somebody about it. It's we call ourselves the Alliance. We align with just about anybody out there. I mean, NRA, NSSF, SCI, Shakar, Alaska Professional Hunting Guides Association. I mean, anybody who is going to be impacted by this, we form an alliance with. We go in as a team, and so that's our thing. It's like, hey, our partners are just as important, if not more so, than we are.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to really get down into and discuss, Brian, was how a local, and I say local, I'm talking state. We even break these hound clubs down smaller into local communities. But you look at Farm Bureau in Indiana, it's the largest lobbying group in the state, most effective. And the way they are successful is this week, Farm Bureau coordinates local members to meet with their representative and brings them into the state house. And then next week, it's a group from another part of the state meeting with another legislator and another part of the state next week. And it just goes on down. And same thing you said, looking at a national level, now they're putting constituents with the decision makers. And Farm Bureau is extremely successful in doing that. And we could do the same thing with the Sportsmen's Alliance if we can get Houndsmen and these state organizations to start aligning themselves and looking for this information. Because I can only imagine that when you walk in to, say, the bear hunting initiative in Maine, there are certain things that you see the Humane Society doing, saying, and you can look at those guys and say, hey, this is the way you need to combat this, because they tried this same stuff in Michigan. They tried it in Missouri, and we already know it. If Chris Powell is trying to fight this by myself with the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance, and I don't have that information, that experience, I'm going to be starting every day. It's going to be like Groundhog's Day, starting everything new. I can get you guys on board because I'm already affiliated with you. And you can say, don't do that. Don't put that on Facebook, because they're going to turn around. They're going to stick the knife right in your back with this. We've already seen it.
Yep. No, that's exactly it. And a lot, we already have relationships with some people, but others we don't. And it helps to have somebody in the room. You have a committee meeting like this, the committee meeting for the Washington bill. Myself and Bruce Tagg, our VP of Government Affairs, were on the phone. He was calling in from Ohio. I was calling in from here on the east side of the state, and we're calling into the west side. Mm-hmm. And, we can make our points and get our points across, but it's hard. We can't see what's going on in the room. We can't get a feel for the room. Right. Well, Buddy Woodbury from W Hound Supply there was in the room representing the hound guys.
Yes.
And he was looking around. We were talking. He's like, yeah, here's what was going on when this person was talking. Here's what it was when you were saying something. And, we got a little long-winded there, but it really drove the point home. So that was good, and so we talked about this stuff behind the scenes and then worked together on calling the different, the rep and the senator and working with them. And so, it really helped a lot, and it was huge. And we ended up being successful because of that alliance and working together.
Mm-hmm. And now the national organization is sitting there. Here's Buddy Woodbury, who knows the chairman of this committee because he's got a relationship with him. So it gives you credibility to be able to speak to the issue. Yep.
So it works for all of us. I mean, it works from, the local guy up to the state, up to the national level, and it works back down. It's, top down and bottom up. It just works better when we're all aligned and working together and using the same messaging and saying the same thing and aligning our efforts instead of fighting against each other or giving conflicting information or settling, saying, oh, okay, well, no, this is good. We'll take that. Because, well, it won't affect these guys. Okay, well, you're forgetting about these other guys over here.
Thank you for bringing that up. It seems like we've got to be willing to sacrifice. A hunter is a hunter, and we put up a lot of barriers in our own community because people don't do the same things we do or do them the way we would do them, and we're more than happy to sacrifice. In the past, I've seen us have these tendencies to be willing to sacrifice other sporting groups because it doesn't directly affect me, and we fail to realize that as soon as they're done running through that group, they're coming after you. So you cannot allow them to have this victory. Whether your deal is sitting in a tree stand chasing a 180-inch white-tailed deer or chasing a rabbit dog through the briars, we got to stand united on this, and that's what the Sportsmen's Alliance can bring to the table for the hound hunting community.
Yeah, no, they don't care what you hunt or how you hunt. They want to ban it all, and they point blank said they're going to ban. They want to ban it all, and they're going to go state by state, species by species, and they're going to do it. Wayne Pacelli from the Humane Society said that point blank on the record, so they don't care. It's like, they may not be coming after you this time, but they will be, and it doesn't matter. It's a circular argument. You can never make them happy. If you're using a rifle with a scope, that's unfair advantage.
Yes.
If you're using a traditional bow with hand carved flint, arrowhead, that's not lethal enough. The animal can suffer. So you're never going to make them happy. There's no happy medium for them. If you're using hounds, that's unfair chase. If you're not using hounds, then you're just taking willy-nilly shots at whatever you happen to see, and you're not being selective. So it doesn't matter. They don't care, and they just want it all gone, and they're working on it.
And they do it in small increments. They come out
little chip away. Yeah,
they just keep
death by 1,000 cuts.
There you go, death by 1,000 cuts. I had this thought one time. I was sitting here and I was thinking about people that say that hunting is not fair chase. Hunting with hounds is not fair chase. Then I look back at some of the oldest historically documented accounts of hunting on cave walls, and it shows men with spears using dogs. And I think, man, if that was such an efficient way to hunt, then why did anybody ever pick up a gun? Why would I waste my time with a $2,000 rifle with a scope on it if all I needed was a dog and a spear? That is such a misconception that we've allowed ourselves to fall prey to, I think.
Well, then I just always flip that script. I'm like, well, you can be more selective. I can take out a male or female. I can age it. I can see if it has cubs, all this.
That's right.
If I'm just shooting without it, I don't know what age class I'm shooting. I don't know if it has cubs or kittens following behind it. If it's male or female. If it's a female, and it's a low density area, we want to let that one go. If it's a male, not a big deal. We can take that without harming the resource. And then you just flip it back on them. And it's like, oh, look, it's not stressed. The cat's asleep. It's not sitting there, that's what they love to say. They're stressed. They're this. And like, no, it's sleeping right there.
Right.
Whatever. So you got to counter back with those punches and the kind of things like that. So there's all sorts of different messaging, but it still is a tough fight, and for the non-hunter, they don't get it. So
yeah, Brian, I appreciate your time today. But before we go, I want to make sure that our listeners know where to find the information they need to contact the Sportsmen's Alliance, get more involved. Go to their leadership of their hound organization and say, hey, have we thought about this? Let's research it. I think we need to go here. But we've got people in our audience that are pretty active, and we'll research this sort of thing. So real quick, tell our audience where they can find Sportsmen's Alliance and how to get this information.
Yep, we're on all the social media stuff. Our Facebook is probably the most active and gets pretty lively sometimes. But everything, our social media and our website are all under the same thing. It's called sportsmensalliance.org. Sportsmen's, MENS, Sportsmen's plural alliance.org. And if you just put in Sportsmen's Alliance into any of those social media stuff, you should be able to find it. On the website, you can sign up for a individual membership, a club membership, or a business partner membership if you have a business. We're a 501c3 and C4 for different legal reasons, and being able to lobby and have lawsuits or fall under different places, as well as our youth education stuff. So those are the C1 or C3 and C4s. So everything's tax deductible. Anything you do, you can write off. And please get involved. There's so much dog stuff. The hound guys are on the front lines of it. Here in Washington, it's been banned. So, I see firsthand what's going on when the hounds get taken away and our cat and bear populations go screaming up, and now the state's killing them instead of sportsmen, and it's coming out of the taxpayers' money. Houndsmen are on the front lines, but it's impacting the bird dog guys, the retriever guys, the hound guys. It's outdoor legislation, it's puppy mill stuff, it's pain and suffering. It's hitting from all sides, and they're taking it piece by piece, state by state.
Brian, I appreciate your time, and we'll definitely be in contact. Feel free to call on, this program, Houndsman XP Podcast, if there is some news that you need to get out there. in a quick. We usually have about a week lead time, but I've put stuff up, and included it in our podcast or made additions, as little as 48 hours in advance, so we can be pretty current on
awesome.
Calls to action that you might need to get out there for certain parts of the country. We'd be more than happy to do that for you. And
excellent.
You got any final thoughts or anything else you want to tell our audience before we sign off?
I just want to say thank you for having us on, and thank you for those that are supporting us. And hopefully anybody that's not takes a look and gets involved, because our dog guys are right on the front lines. We're also one of the most dedicated groups out there. The Hounds guys are great. They've been a great audience, and they have a lot at stake here, but they're vocal, and it helps a lot when we need people to call. So just like to say, give us a shot and check us out, and thank you very much.
You bet, Brian. And one of the things I know some of our audience have been in committee hearings and different things this last legislative session about these animal contests and performance dog contests. And we were going to talk about that, and I just forgot. Did a poor job of hosting there.
Got a little carried away talking about everything else, and just goes back to show that there's so much to talk about.
There really is.
But this is another example, that houndsmen are being caught in. So what we've seen in 2019 and it's continued this year is coyote contests. It started in New Mexico, I believe. That banning of coyote contests, where you get a bunch of guys together, throw money into the pot or prizes or whatever, and you have a 2 or 3 day hunt. Whoever comes in with the most coyotes, in first, second, and third, you win the money or you win ribbons or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, they don't like that. They got some footage in Oregon. They showed that, and it's not an appealing picture, right? Like, you got a bunch of guys carrying dead coyotes around, throwing them back of pickups. It's not good PR for that be showing on the local news, and especially when they introduce a bill right afterwards and attach it to it. But these wildlife contest bills started in New Mexico, went up to Oregon, went up to Montana, if you can believe it, Wisconsin, New Jersey, New York, Nevada. And we just watched it. And again, this is the Humane Society of the United States driving the bus and making a coordinated attack on hunting. It started with coyotes, but as it moved up to Oregon, it moved across the top there, the language changed. It said coyote contests, but the language would actually say any predator, any fur bearer, any wildlife contest where wildlife is killed for a prize, for money, for ribbons, for entertainment, So if you're going out on a coon hunt and killing the coon and you give out a ribbon for first place or whatever for your dog's work, you just violated the law. So it would impact and take away your field trials, your upland bird guys, putting out chuckers or whatever, using ducks and retriever stuff. Some places pen-raised birds were allowed. Some places it was defined as wildlife. So it would take those away across the board. These are the unintended consequences, unintended in air quotes. It's written specifically at coyotes, and then all of a sudden it morphed into wildlife. And the scary part was, by the time we went across the country and came back to the West Coast in Nevada, it was introduced as a felony. It was the same as manslaughter if you broke this law.
Right.
So, that's an example of how the hound guys and the dog guys in general, how their entire method for selecting bloodlines could be wiped out in an instant, in an entire state, by banning wildlife contests. And again, it sounds legitimate to the non-hunting public, even some of the hunters.
Sure.
We're having some hunters saying, I don't think there's a need for this. Never mind the biological and the fact that coyotes in the East are invasive predators, so that's a big issue, and that's a big trend we've seen, and it's been moving state to state to state. And so it's something to watch out for and understand that, at first glance, you may not think you have a stake in this, but the hound guys, the bird dog guys and retriever guys would be impacted hugely by it. And thankfully, they've also been the most vocal groups.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at first, these things are well received. And then when the field trial folks all get a hold of it, it takes off like wildfire.
Yeah.
Everybody starts calling, and it ends up getting killed so far.
There's a lot of different directions to spin off of that. And for me, the first time I heard of a coyote contest was actually one that was run out of the state of, it was organized and held in the state of Pennsylvania. And then every time there is a victory to stop something like that that's misunderstood, then it seems like it gets the next round is more restrictive. So now it's you take a competition hound event, a night hunt, commonly referred to as a night hunt. One of the things that clearly it expresses in the rules that no wildlife shall be killed during the contest. Does that mean that you can control your dog that incidentally catches a raccoon on the ground and it ends up killing it? You can't prevent all of that, but we've watched as there's, you hear about gun grabs. Well, this is like a rights or a freedoms grab by the anti-hunting community that, okay, we got this outlawed out here for this, so let's go ahead and get these competition coon dog guys while we're working on this too. Let's just make all animal contests bad, evil, and get it all taken care of.
Oh, yeah. And then all they have to do is show a picture of a little raccoon, eating something or playing with a little kid or something. And, here you have this, and then you show the big dogs barking and, drool come out of his mouth or something. You just,
right.
It's an image that gets seared in there, but, again, they don't understand it and what is actually taking place with the contests and the breeding and the lines and, what all goes into the genetics and why it's important, so it's just another example of what they do and how they do it. Mm-hmm. Each individual state sitting there going, oh, hey, they introduced this. And, maybe there's mediocre backlash or whatever. But when you step back, you look at it and go, oh, this just got introduced in 9 states within a 2-week period.
And you get some bureaucrat that's like
behind all of it.
Yeah, and then you get some bureaucrat, a government-appointed bureaucrat that thinks he needs to one-up all his buddies, and he throws in a little extra language and say, we are very proactive on this thing. We see what's happening, and that's how this stuff grows its own head and takes off on its own.
In Oregon, it was actually a smaller town in Oregon that the legislator introduced it. They got her to introduce it. We got a hold of her, and she was like, oh, I didn't realize this. Okay. And she publicly said, I didn't understand it. Thank you for educating me. I'm withdrawing it. And
Good
then 2 guys out of Portland, your urban voting bloc, 2 guys out of Portland picked it up and said, we'll do it. And they started pushing it. And they didn't care. They didn't care what we had to say or anything. And just a couple months before, literally in the suburbs of a major city, a little kid was bitten. The coyotes were attacking. Same thing happened in Vermont right now. Right now they're trying, this last session, we killed it, but they were trying to ban trapping and then ban the coyote contests. They had a rabid coyote in town, chased a woman and her dogs into their house. She slammed the door on the dog's head. They were both bitten. Then the dog went after, or the coyote went after a moving car. And then it attacked a toddler in town, on the edge of town, in a park, while she's walking with her family, and the dad had to kill with their bare hands. Mm-hmm. So they're literally got rabid coyotes running around town, and they're trying to take away methods and means of controlling that population. So it just doesn't make sense from any type of wildlife management standpoint.
I'm going to ask you the million-dollar question, and we've talked about this issue on this program before, but Sportsmen's Alliance is literally involved in thousands of these fights a year, or at least made aware of them. Can you comment on the posting of graphic videos on social media?
Oh. how much ammo do you want to give the other side? I mean, we get it, right? Like, we understand it. We're part of that culture, and we understand what's happening in these things. But we live in a soundbite society nowadays. All that matters are the headlines. All that matters is the image. The more that people post up graphic content or do stupid things on pictures, or video and post it, you're just handing ammunition to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
They take that and they misrepresent it. Sometimes they don't even misrepresent it. Sometimes it's just stupid,
right.
And people are putting it out there, and it makes us all look bad, and it gives them the platform and the evidence to put out there in the media. And then that hits the media, it hits the social, and when it hits the social, all of a sudden you causes a storm with the anti-hunting people, but then they pull in all the non-hunting people. 80% of non-hunters support hunting,
right,
as a wildlife management tool.
Yep.
As soon as you say the word trophy, or you have gratuitous violence or whatever, you're killing mass amounts of them, even if there are mass amounts out there and it's biologically sound, and you're showing this graphically, that turns them off and they go the other side. It just plummets. So we have to keep it in the management realm and think about it. I mean, all you have to do is pick up any outdoor magazine out there and look at the pictures that are selected.
Mm-hmm.
There's a process, clean, respectful, nice poses, whatever. I always say, you don't have to be ashamed to be a hunter, but you don't have to do something stupid either. We don't have to provoke people.
I appreciate your honesty.
Have some common sense. Have common sense when you're doing this.
Yeah.
If this is going to turn off a non-hunter, like, what are you going to get out of it? Like, I don't know. I get the whole thing. Like, I'm not going to hide it, and I'm proud to do this. Like, I understand that, but what's the bigger picture here?
Right.
If you're going to turn off the non-hunting public and you're going to cause a storm with the antis, and it ends up, the end result eventually is going to be a law that stops you from doing that.
Yeah.
Does the ends justify the means?
We talk about this at different times during this podcast, but it really comes down to a level of maturity and humility. I've been to Bear Bay Ups. I've been to, these different situations where, the dogs do come in contact with game, and you try to mitigate that as much as you can, because I don't like paying vet bills.
No.
But at the same time, I've even told people, just turn the camera off. You may be videoing your hound doing this or that, but just turn it off, because even if you think, well, I'm never going to post this on social media, I won't ever post this on Facebook, but I'm going to text it to my buddies, and then he shares it with a buddy, and he shares it with a buddy, and he shares it with a buddy, and then it pops up on Facebook, and then they take the animal rights people that are paid to sit media for this type of stuff. They take it, snip it, and put it into the narrative that they want. You just allowed them to start controlling the narrative for who houndsmen are and what we stand for. And that's a very small part of it. You may have been, your intent to videotape that may have been to capture when your dog was
how to break it up, but that's not how it's going to get used.
But by the time,
here's a pretty easy way to do it.
Okay.
Let's say, let's take a picture of your wife. What kind of picture are you going to put out there for everybody to see? Are you going to put out there one where she looks pretty and respectful and you're nice with her and you're hanging out with her? Or are you going to put out the naked photo and send it to your buddy? I mean, which one do you want the other person to get a hold of? Let's be respectful and smart about this.
And I've used this analogy before. I've got 3 kids. I didn't have to, and I'm very proud of them. I like posting pictures of them, but I didn't videotape how they got here. You know what I mean?
There you go. Exactly.
So have some sense here, people. I'm glad. And the last thing is, and you can probably speak to this better than I can. you get a politician or a representative, a legislator that's on your side. They want to represent you, and then all of a sudden the opponents of this come in with this sort of thing. They're painting your friend into the corner now, because if he stands up and says, "Yeah, I'm going to stand strong and fight for their freedoms to do this," what they've got to capitulate to is that they approve of what these people just showed them.
Yeah.
So we're not helping our wildlife officials and our representatives by thinking that we've got to impress our buddies with graphic videos. Yep.
Nope, exactly right. It's a PR campaign, and politicians tend to like to get reelected. And if you paint them into an impossible corner or make them look bad, that's not going to work out well for you. Yep. So we have to quit making it harder on ourselves, and think about how is a non-hunter going to view this? Mm-hmm. What are they going to view when they see it? Or I work with college kids, my old fraternity in college, and I'm their chapter advisor. And, you had college boys that are 18 to 22 and some beers, and they have a tendency to do a lot of stupid stuff. So I tell them, like, boys, write tomorrow's headline. Like, what are you doing today that's going to be in tomorrow's headline? And would you want to see it? Would you want your employer to see it? Would you want your family to see that headline?
Right.
We kind of have to do the same thing. What am I doing right now? What picture am I taking? What video am I taking? Well, what's the headline going to be tomorrow if Humane Society of the United States gets their hands on this?
Right.
What's that headline look like?
Yep.
The worst possible scenario, because that's what it'll be.
Well, it's been a while since we talked about that topic, so I thought it was a good time to revisit and talk about it again, because I don't think we can talk about it enough. I'm not ashamed of who I am. I'm not ashamed of who I am. I'm not ashamed of what I do, but I have to be smart on how I represent myself, because I don't get to represent Chris Powell. I'm representing every houndsman across the United States, because you are the ones who can be affected by my choices, and it's important that I make good choices.
That's right. The world's bigger than just one of us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, Brian, I think that's going to do it. And unless you can think of anything else we need to cover.
I think we got her now.
Hey, I really do appreciate your time. And we have a way of closing out every podcast here. And, you've been on some hound adventures and some hound hunts, and you know how this goes. A lot of times I'll meet friends of mine out west, and they'll be hunting their dogs, and I'll be hunting my hounds. And when we turn these dogs loose, we may end up with a split race, or maybe my dogs don't know what they're supposed to be doing. But no matter what happens, you follow your hounds, and I'll follow mine.